Hey guys, so we're doing a follow-up video today on this fan and rivet situation. So I haven't had time between Cerakoting the fan and recently we're getting ready to install this on the engine, and I haven't had any success with the rivet situation at all. So what I did is I used my hub that I pulled off the fan originally, and this one is no good because you can see it has some grooving on the inside there. So this fan would have been no good anyways to put back on the car. And we can't buy a new replacement because they just simply don't make this fan anymore for that particular shroud on the car. I guess in the early years they had a couple of different shrouds, different sizes, and this is the one that they don't make. So we're kind of limited to our options. Anyhow, so I thought, well, let me play around with this one with the rivets and try and either pound them in by hand, set them by hand in a punch somehow, or a pneumatic tool. And as you can see, there's no way I would turn any of this technology loose on this finish work over here. No success at all, not even close. So in my mind, this just simply can't be done by hand or by a pneumatic tool for this situation. I've always had kind of in my mind that this was done with a press and a jig where you have solid backing and maybe some kind of a heavy hydraulic press comes down on it or something like that with a dome shape head that will form the rivet on the back side, because the back side of these rivets were rounded over, they weren't flat. And I could probably get them in there and hand punch them and beat them up and get them to stay and be flat, but it really wouldn't be right. So let's take a look at some of these rivets here and show you what I used, and then we'll tell you how we're going to balance this thing and actually cure our rivet problem. So let's take a look at some rivets here, and I'll show you what came with the hub. So I bought the hub. It's an aftermarket hub. I bought it from Aussie Sales and refinished the color so it wasn't quite right, and I had to do some tune-up on the outside perimeter to make it fit. It didn't quite press in there. So I put it in a drill, I spun it, and just trimmed down that outside and was able to seat it evenly. And these were the rivets that they supplied with the hub. And these measure out 3/16 by 3/4 in length, and the head angle is 78 degrees. So what I decided to do was go online. I looked up on rivetsonline.com, and I managed to find these, which was as close as I could get to the ones that came with the fan. You can see the end is a little bit different, it's a little bit more rounded over. You can stay focused here. And one thing I didn't like about the ones I got online is it has a little dimple in the middle of the head there. So, you know, get through the whole job, even if you can get them pressed in there, you got to look at that dimple for the rest of your life. Or you can polish this down or shave this down, but then the head gets smaller, so that's not going to work. So they measure kind of identical, even though visually they look a little bit different from each other. But either way, no success with any tooling or any method I've been able to come up with. In our original heads, you can see here, they seem to be just a little bit bigger in diameter than the ones that they're replacing them with, ever so slightly. And that makes a big difference when you set them into the hub. So this one feels flush here. You can see there, that one's nice and flush. But then the ones I got online, the same dimensions, I can feel that's dropped down in there. It's actually below grade there. So if it's below grade and you try to press this and you're using this area for backing, that's going to be a problem. It absolutely has to be flush. You definitely don't want it proud, but flush is the desired dimension that we want to have. So our scale is saying 34.84 ounces, so just over 2 pounds complete assembly here. What we can do to balance this, originally they did some drilling, you can see, to balance things out. Whether they did that before they installed the hub or after, I have no idea. Probably after. But one thing I think we have going for us is that when these hubs are made, they're all done on a lathe. You can see everything's turned, so I would find it odd if something was out of balance on something that was manufactured in that fashion. But let's go ahead and check the contraption I've got made up here that we can check and verify our balance. All right, so this is my non-scientific contraption for doing like a static balance for this thing. And originally what this plastic device is for balancing lawnmower blades, which are much longer than what we have here. But it's really the only thing I can think of in a cone type configuration that will settle in and tell us one way or another where we're leaning. I don't have anything I can spin it and get to that. I don't have that kind of technology. But this could be pretty good. So I'll tell you a quick story once. When I was in high school, my dad had an E-type Jaguar, and it had wire wheels. And he had a problem with his front right wheel. They couldn't balance. He kept taking it back to the tire shop. They'd put it on their machine. They'd spin it. They'd pound some weights in it. And it just wouldn't balance. It was constantly shaking and shimmying. So I said, hey, Dad, let me take it to school. We've got a tire balancer there. Let's see what we can do. So I took it to auto shop, and my auto shop instructor at the time, Mr. Harry, said, well, let's try the bubble balancer, which looks something like this. So we sat the wire wheel on the bubble balancer, and it was leaning, and we pulled all the weights off. We could see there was nowhere in the ballpark according to the bubble. So we set it up with weights that suited the bubble, and we put it on the car, and that thing drove like a champ. My dad was thrilled. He never had another shimmy ever again. So sometimes, you know, archaic technology actually can be beneficial. So that's what we're going to use here on this thing. Let's see how this thing works. So then I'm just going to gently press our cone in there. It's not tight, but it is centered and fit. Now the whole idea is the point should center itself up on the exact center of that cone and tell us where we're leaning. And then we just spin it a little bit and let it seat itself in. Okay, so it just stopped spinning, and I'm just going to try and capture the bubble with this camera overhead. You can see there it's a little bit off center, but it's not bad. And this is one complete screw assembly. Let's go ahead and put that in. And you can see now it trues up that bubble. Okay, so I definitely think we're close enough to run with. I'm not concerned now about being majorly out of balance there, which would be a real problem for your alternator bearing. So moving on to the rivet situation then. So temporarily I have fastened the hub with this hardware. I'm going to switch this hardware out for this hardware here. This is a keep nut. This is an M4 by 16 cap head screw. And these are going to be the right length and size to flush out in here, and the backside where we're not going to be hitting our alternator when we put it in there. And I'm going to Loctite those in there. I'm going to tighten it down, and I'm going to go with this for startup, timing, and basically set the carburetors and get it all tuned up and get the car out of the booth. I really just need it out of there right now, and we can deal with this fan at a later date. If you do something like this, I really think this is a temporary method, and I wouldn't recommend doing this as a permanent way to fasten a hub. One of the problems, as you can see in there, is that hole is offset. Okay, so your hub could turn if you have your screws too small. It could take up that slack. So you need a really more right size fastener to fit in that hole and nut it down, and you just don't have the space in here to go with something that's going to work like that. So if you ever decide to do something like this, I would just, in my mind, keep it as a temporary solution that maybe you could start your car and run it, tune it up. But I don't know that I'll run very long with it or very far with it, considering the RPMs that these things would be turning. At some point, you're going to need to have it permanently riveted to be safe, especially if you're going to do any racing. Okay, so then that's the temporary things we can do to bolt up our hub, and that's one way we can get it balanced. But for the correct way, there really is nothing a DIY guy can do to permanently rivet that hub in, or at least anything that I could come up with. This is one of those situations where professional is needed, the right tooling is needed, and somebody with some experience who's done this before, because there are people out there that can do this. I'm not one of them. He has the tooling, he has the experience, and has agreed to help us out. So we've got a guy by the name of Joe Legs in San Diego. I talked to him about the situation here, and he's agreed to help us out. So I'm going to take this alternator as it is right now, because I just need to get it on the car and get that car going and out of the booth in the short term for timing reasons and weather reasons. Soon as everything's tuned up, the car's in the garage safely, I'll pull this fan off, we'll take it to Joe, and he can work his magic on there. We'll get it back and take a fresh look at it, and then we'll have the correct fastening method for something like this. And also, you know, one of the things about the early air-cooled Porsche is when you open the engine lid and you look at that engine, this is the first thing that's staring right at you. It's always the fan. If there's anything that needs to be right, it really needs to be this guy here. It needs to look right, needs to have the right rivets in there. If you really want to do it the right way, that's how we're going to get there. We're just going to have to turn it over to the professionals. Okay, so fast forwarding here a few weeks, so we managed to get through our initial startup, and our temporary bolt-up situation worked really well. So the car is out of the booth in the garage now. We have our fan wrapped up in some real thick, soft microfiber plush rags, and then also separate our hub here. So then we're going to bubble wrap these thoroughly, keep them separated, double boxing, and send them off to Joe. Okay, so we got our package back here. Real quick turnaround, only 6 days from shipping to Joe, him doing the work and getting it back to us. Let's go ahead and open this up and see what we got. Oh yeah. Okay, there's our rivets. Oh yeah, look at that. That is fantastic. So you can see right here, this is the residual bite marks of our locking nut of our temporary fastening method, but the rivets peened over like they should be, looking just like it should, and definitely feels tight. Absolutely beautiful. Okay, so if you guys are looking for a method to get through your rebuild on your alternator fan, this is one way to get there. Also, Joe can provide the entire service for you. You can rebuild this thing, recondition it, and re-rivet a new hub on there if that's what you need, or just parts of it. I'm going to leave his contact information down below, and so please feel free to reach out to him for any kind of Porsche work. And also, he works on other exotic cars, so real interesting website he has there. Please be sure to check it out. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get this installed back on the car, and we'll see you guys on the next video.